Okay. In the last two sessions, we covered serial number and lot control or lot numbering. In today's session, we'll see locator control, or call it as stock locator. So we're done with these two controls. In today's session, we'll see lot control or stock locator. Fine. When we look at inventory organization structure, when you look at inventory organization, so we know very well we create item master organization for item definition. But when you look at the real inventory organization, which we are calling as child organization, so for every inventory, we require sub-inventory as a mandatory as per system. It may be required, may not be required as per business. If you are creating inventory organization within the system, and if you want to receive the material into any inventory organization, sub-inventory is mandatory. If reality business doesn't have any sub-inventory, still in the system we have to create at least dummy sub-inventory so that we can receive the material and we can perform the material transactions. That could be miscellaneous receipt or miscellaneous issue or any other transaction. Reality, the GRN, when we receive the material, we have to pick. In the same way, when we are delivering the material also, we have to specify from sub inventory we are picking to deliver the material to the customer. For all the inventory transactions, sub inventory is required. Fine. Since it is required, we create. But reality, if organization is going to have sub inventories, how many they require, they can create. That's how we can segregate. Sub inventories ideally address the physical area within the inventory organization. Subdivisioning. Okay, it's nothing but subdivisioning. And still, if you want to do the subdivisioning for sub inventories, you want to have a further segregation for sub inventories. So every inventory, for every inventory you have to create the sub inventory. If one inventory is going to segregate into 10 partitions, we create 10 sub inventories. If every sub inventory is you are going to do the further segregation, so that you can do with the concept called as locators. The concept called as locator, you can segregate the sub inventory. You want to segregate sub inventory into different areas. Okay, areas. That's all. Your requirement is you want to maintain your inventory organization by following this structure. Inventory, within the inventory, sub inventories. Within the each sub inventory, you want to maintain the areas. Every sub inventory may have one or two or three, more than one area segregation. Okay, this could be your requirement, or else your requirement may be lab inventory and sub inventory. That anyway, it's as per system mandatory, you should create. Further, you want to have you want to have some further segregation within the sub inventory. You want to maintain the different specifications. Okay, what you can say is you want to maintain the row segregation. That's all. That could be your requirement. Or within the rows you want to maintain the rack also. So here, as per your business, every sub inventory, within the sub inventory you want to have a segregation as a rows, where you will be just arranging the items. Again, in each row you want to have a further segregation called as a rack. So it's a rack. This could be your requirement to manage the items within the sub inventories. And still, if you want to go with a further segregation along with this rack, you may want to have the concept called as bin. So how much minute level of segregation you want to have totally depends how you are going to manage your inventory. Okay. So if not these names, you may have some different naming conventions as per your requirement. It's all about we are trying to understand the segregation, the physical location within your sub-inventory, what are the location, what are the physical location you are going to have, how you want to manage, how you want to have for physical segregation to maintain the stock. Okay. So it could be your requirement, maybe in every sub-inventory you want to have a multiple areas of segregation, or within the sub-inventory you want to have a row and within the row racks, or else your requirement could be within the sub-inventory you want to have rows, within the rows racks, within the racks bin, and this is how you want to have. Whatever it may be your requirement within the sub-inventory, if you want to have a further segregation, you can use the concept called as a locator. With the concept called as a locator, okay, and as per our application the feature name is locators. So the feature is locators. By using this feature called as locators, you can create any segregation. By default, Oracle is providing inventory organization creation feature. Within that, sub inventory creation separate task they are providing to create the sub inventories. But if you want to create area or row or rack or row rack bin or something else, if you want to create as a part of within the sub inventory, so we don't have a separate different tasks to create each and everything. Any naming convention you want to use for the sub inventory physical segregation, we use the feature called as a locator. With the help of locator, we can create anything within the sub inventory so that you can maintain the stock accordingly. You'll be able to track, and you'll be able to identify the items within those physical locations which are part of sub inventory as per your requirement. Take simple example. If you want to record any business transactions, we have to address each and every transaction belongs to which company, which department, which account. It totally depends. Based on the client requirement, we create the chart of account structure. In our uh, classes, we created in our classes we created three segments as a part of chart of accounts. By using the accounting key flex field, we created chart of account structure. Within that, we created segments. In the same way, however, we have a accounting key flex field. In the same way, for inventory, we have a locator key flex field. By using the locator key flex field, you can create the structure by following which structure you want to maintain and track material within the sub inventory. Within the sub inventory within the sub inventory, if you want to have further segregation called as area, in that case, by using the locator key flex field, create only one segment. It allows up to 10 segments. If you want to have a further segregation just area, create one segment by using the locator key flex field. If you want to have a segregation of row and rack, then by using the locator key flex field, create two segments structure, locator structure. If you want to have a this kind of segregation for the sub inventory to maintain the stock and to track, by using the locator key flex field, create three segments or four or five, six, how you want to have. It's all about business requirement. It's not mandatory as per system. If business demands, then only you can go with this segregation. Even locator controls also, if organization is looking for the further segregation or further tracking within the sub inventory level, within the sub inventory, then only we require locator control. Okay. So this is a point we have to understand that with the locator control, what we can do is we can go with a further divisioning of sub inventories. Okay. Say simply to divide sub inventory or sub inventories. Okay, with this we can divide the sub inventories so that it's all about what we are dividing. the physical location, physical area. Physical area of the sub inventory we are going to divide. Okay, so that we'll be able to identify in which sub inventory, in which physical area, what you call as a row, rack, or bin, or just area, whatever you call. Accordingly, you can maintain the stock. When you are receiving the material into organization, ideally we select sub inventory. But if you are going to have a row within the sub inventory, the item you want to place in the which row. Further, you want to take into rack also, you will be able to specify in which sub inventory, in which row, and which rack you want to maintain the stock. When we are going to issue the material also, you can specify in which, from which sub inventory, within the sub inventory, from which row and which rack you want to issue the material. Everything will be able to maintain for controlling purpose, so that if you are going to maintain the stock accordingly by following this further structure or segregation, you will be able to track also in this sub inventory, within this row, how much quantity of material we have, within that row, in so and so rack, how much quantity we have. So easily you will be able to pick the item whenever required, and you can manage. Okay, so this is the purpose we have a locator control. It's all about further segregation of sub inventories. If required, we implement, otherwise we ignore. As per to implement inventory application, this is not at all mandatory. So any questions on this, please? To understand locator control or stock locator, any questions, please?
Lakshman,
Yep.
where the pallet will fit into this?
You can see, you can go with how you are going to design that hierarchy of tracking of material or storing of the material within your inventory. Okay, we created chart of accounts. We created chart of account. First segment we take in company, because when you're recording the transaction, primarily that you have to address the transaction belongs to which company. Then within that company, which department. When you perform the transaction within the department, that should belongs to specific activity, nothing but account. So it's completely how you are going to manage, how you want to build the structure of your sub inventory. Accordingly, you can arrange it. You can arrange it. Okay, that's what I said just here. Sub inventory directly you may have a segregation as areas only. That's all. You are not going with the concept called as rows and within that racks, or else you may have a segregation only within the sub inventory. Whatever the stock you maintain within the rows. That's all. No further concept of rack, or else you may have a rack within the rows. So it's all about, it completely depends on how you are going to organize your material within the sub inventories if required, or else directly you can get the material into sub inventories. It's the naming convention, it's purely depends how you want to name it. But ideally, okay, in most of the cases you see this sort of segregation. This is standard way, like you maintain within rows, racks. It's a very generic practice. Apart from that, how you want to have a naming convention, that's your wish. Totally depends. Fine. So to implement it, what setups we have to do, we'll see first. Okay, what setups we have to do, we'll see. And what level you can control is locator related configuration. Okay, that also we'll look into that. First we'll see what setups we have to do. Now we'll go with this structure. Okay, we have a sub inventory. Within the sub inventory, let's try to create the row and rack. Okay, we'll create the row and rack. That means by using the locator key flex field, we have to create two segments. So within the locator key flex field, we have to create the two segment. One segment is row, other segment is rack. So for chart of accounts also, to create the, before we go to create the chart of accounts, we created value sets. For company, we created company value set. For department account, we created value sets, so that you can maintain the values with the help of value sets, which you can associate with a specific segment within the chart of account. Same logic is applicable here. First what we have to do is we have to create two value sets, for one for row. We are going with this case. Okay, anyway, these are the very much standard. So within the sub inventory we want to have a further segregation called as a row. Within the row, rack. Done. So we'll go and create the two value sets, one for row, other one for rack. Done. So create inventory value sets for stock locator. So one is row value set, other one is rack value set. Two value sets we are going to create. After creating the two value sets, we have to create the structure. We have to create the structure for locator key flex field. Say create locator key flex field structure. We'll create the structure. Within the structure we'll have a two segments. One is row, other one is rack. Done. So after creating the chart of account structure, what we did, we cannot use the chart of account structure directly. Against the structure we have to create instance. Here also same is applicable. So even if you create the locator key flex field structure that you cannot use, that you cannot associate, what are the structures we create, those we associate to specific sub inventory. Which sub inventory required what structure, means with which segments we required structure, accordingly the structures need to be associated with the sub inventories. But here in Fusion, against the structures we have to create the instance. The same logic is applicable for this locator key flex field also. So now we have to create locator key flex field structure instance. After creating the instance, we know we have to perform the deployment. After deployment, you can maintain the value set values. You can create what are the rows we have, what are the racks we have as a segment value set values as a segment values. So here you can create the value. After creating the value sets also, you can create the segment values into those value sets. It's not mandatory how to wait for the deployment, same as a chart of account structure. Okay, but let's follow this process sequence. So after deployment we can create segment values. Here segments are, row is one segment, rack is another segment. For each segment we are creating the value sets. That means for row value set and rack value set will create the values. Fine. So this is how we have to complete the setups. After completing the setups, so that chart of account structure instance would be available to associate with your sub inventory. First we'll complete this. After completing this locator key flex field structure, then we'll talk about other setups which are required. That means for which inventory organization you want to apply this, you want to implement this locator control, and how to go with the sub inventory level specifications, what are the different options we have, we'll see. Okay, done. First we'll complete these setups, then we'll see what are the other setups we have to focus if you want to implement this locator control. And one more point. So in case of EBS, okay, just I'm referring, if you are aware of EBS, you can take this point, or else simply you can ignore it. So if you are from EBS background, we know very well in EBS we can create only one structure, one location structure you can create, that you have to use across the instance. But in the Fusion you can have a number of structures, and if you have a 10 sub inventories, for each sub inventory you can go with a separate structure also. That is possible. Here you have a flexibility, you can create a number of structures. Which structure we require for your sub inventory to manage further segregation, those you can manage. That is possible. Fine, done. First we'll create the value sets. Which value sets? One value set for row, other value set for rack. You can do it from the project or directly from the search page you can do it. Setup and maintenance. Go to task list. Let's do it from the search page. It allows. Search for the task called as inventory value sets. Okay, inventory value sets. Manage inventory value sets. We know very well how to create the value set. We created value sets for chart of account segments. Same process we are going to follow. Click on create. So ERP tree row. Module, select inventory. You could see the name as a inventory management. Select it. So validation type say independent. Value data type character. Value subtype is text. And maximum length. When we are going to enter the row name or row number, and how many characters you want to enter. I'm giving 10 characters. Let's just save and close. So now what we want to do is, so rows, within the rows will have a racks, means rack always will depend on the row. Instead of going with very independent values creation, if you are going to enter rack specific rack number or rack name, there has to be rack numbers need to be filtered by row. In which row, which racks we have, you want to, if you want to filter, you can create the rack value set as a dependent. It will depend on the row. Okay, so we'll see that. Okay, we can make the dependency. That means rack values always depends on the row value selection. Instead of making as a independent, we can make rack as a dependent on the row. In that case, how to create value set we'll see. So your pit tree rack. Select module as a inventory management. Validation type. If you select independent, again irrespective of row which you are selecting, it displays all the rack values. If you want to filter the rack values based on the row selection, make as a dependent. Just make as a dependent, so that whatever the row you select, the row specific within the rows, whatever the racks we have, those only system will display. Ideally we require in that way only. Instead of searching for the values among many values, simply you can filter that enable the control when you are selecting the values, so you never commit with the mistakes to select wrong rack in the specific row. Just select as a validation type as a dependent. This will depend on which value set that will specify. Here value data type is character, and text, the maximum length say 10, and here you can specify this rack value set will depend on which value set, row value set. The rack values what we select, those need to be filtered by the rack value, row value, whatever the row you select, based on the row only the rack value system has to display. Otherwise it will display all. If you go with independent, it will display all, even that rack is not part of specific row which you selected. Let's filter. So this value set, rack value set, will depend on this independent value set called as a row. That's all. So save and close. Done. We created two value sets since we plan to have a two segments within the locator key flex field. Based on the requirement, you can create a number of. Fine, done. We created value set. Now we'll go and create the structure. Okay, search for locator key flex field. Search for locator key flex field. The task name is manage inventory locator key flex field. First we have to create the structure. So here we have application inventory management. Within that we have a key flex field called as locator flex field. So click on manage structures. Click on create. You can give the name as ERP tree locator flex field. So when we are going to create two segments. When you select those two segment values, okay, when we are receiving the material, any as a part of transactions, how those row value and rack value need to be separated. Which delimiter you can select and say save, so that system will allow us to create the segments within this locator key flex field. So we plan to create two segments only. That is the reason we created two value sets to associate with respect to segments. First we'll create segment called as a row. Click on create. Segment code is row. Same logic already we discussed at the time of chart of accounts. Seems to some issue we have in this. It is saying that you have to use the segment identifier row is not valid. The application keywords entail structure here locator. So the segment identifier must begin with an English letter. It is English letter only, but it's not able to recognize. Enters one more letter, it may accept. So name is row only. Since system is not able to understand, we given this one more. Just I added one more R. That's all. Otherwise not required. This is going to be first segment. So short name and everything same. Display width 10 characters. And we create this is going to be first segment 1 you can select and associate this row value set to the row segment. ERP row. Select and say okay and say save and close. And one more segment, click on create. Segment name is rack. I think it has some validation number of characters also. Earlier just row means 3 characters, so it is not able to address the proper validation. Fine. Second segment, prompt and short prompt everything same. So display width 10 characters space it has to display. 10 means display width. It's going to be segment 2, and we have value set for rack also. Assign that value set to this segment. So save and close. Click on save and close. Click on done. We created structure. Now we have to create the instance against the structure. Here is the tab called as manage structure instances. Click on manage structure instances and click on create. You can give the name as ERP3 Locator Flex. This is the instance name. Now we want to create the instance against which structure. If you remember how we created chart of account structure and instance, we are following the same. That's what you can notice. Okay, there is one more structure which is already created in this instance as a part of vision. As a part of vision definition, Oracle created one structure. This is the one which we created just now. Select whatever we created. Within that we have two segments. The two segments select into this instance. So we know how to select, right? Select. So select this row segment, click on edit, say required, enable checkbox called as required, say OK. And here system is marking as required, and select rack, click on edit, enable it as required, and say OK. Marked as required. Now we have two segments within the instance which we copied from this structure. Done. So save and close. Click on done. Now we can see the locator flex field status is edited. We have to submit this locator flex field for deployment. Entire locator flex field we have to submit for deployment, so that within this locator flex field, what are the structures and instances we have, system will perform the validation. Okay, click on deployment, deploy flex field. We don't have many structures and instances. It won't take much time to complete this. Done. So no errors, no warnings. Zero errors, zero warnings. Say OK. Done. You can see the status as edited. So now you may add some values into this value sets. We'll go and add the segment values. Okay. Search for inventory value sets. The value set name is ERP3 row. First we'll create the values for row. So this is a value set. Click on manage values. Click on add. So we given maximum length as a 10. Now you can create the value in 10 digits, description in 10, the value in 10 digits, description. We didn't set any rule. So since it's a row value set, I want to create R1, nothing but row 1. Description I want to write as a row 1. The value I want to address as a R1. Click on add. R2 means row 2, or else R1 means first row, R2 means second row, R3 means third row. However you want to maintain the values and description, you can write it. R3 means row 3. R4. This is how like you can maintain the number of values, how many rows you have as a part of the sub inventory. Say save and close. Now we'll go and create few values for rack. Search for rack value set. This is the arbitrary rack value set. Click on manage values. Click on create. So RC1 means rack 1. Okay. So we specify this is a dependent value set. Okay. The RC1, the rack 1 is going to be part of which row? Row 1. Within the row 1 we are going to have a rack 1. Click on add. RC2 means rack 2. RC2 means rack 2. This rack 2 is going to be part of which row? In row 1 only you are going to have a rack 2. RC3, or you may have some unique numbering also for rows and racks, but here just for our understanding I'm going with a similar naming for the values also. Rack 3 also part of row 1. Then this is how you can just maintain the values by mapping the reality into system. Done. So we're done with these setups. Fine. Now we want to implement this the row rack concept. That means when you are receiving the material into specific inventory organization, you will select sub inventory. Again within the sub inventory you want to take that material into which rack and which row and which rack. So if you want to apply this locator concept means locator is the key flex field which facilitate to maintain the rows, racks or area or however whatever the structure we require. Sorry. Fine. So if you want to use this functionality, if you want to implement this rack or locator control for existing inventory organizations, you have to make sure that no on-hand stock, on-hand quantities available within those inventory organizations. But we created two inventory organization. Within those two inventory organization, we have some on-hand stock availability, so we cannot directly implement it. So to implement and to test this functionality, we'll create new inventory organization. Within the new inventory organization, we'll create sub inventory, and then we will be able to test it. If you want to test this functionality on existing inventory organizations, make sure that you don't have any on-hand stock availability within those inventory organizations, so that system will allow you to go and set these controls. Okay, we'll see that. Right, now what we'll do is we'll go and create the inventory organization. Okay, we'll see what setups we have to perform. So locator related configuration is ready. The structure, everything is ready, which we can associate to sub inventory. For which sub inventory, which structure is required to manage that material within the sub inventory, accordingly you can choose. Now, this is ready. But for which inventory organization, in which inventory organization you want to implement this stock locator concept, you have to just you can decide on that. Since already we have a whatever the inventory organization we have, we perform the transaction, we have on-hand quantity availability, so that system won't allow us to apply this logic to existing. If you want to use existing only for existing inventory only want to implement this, just make that on-hand quantity as 0 by issuing or by performing some other transactions. Done. Now we'll create new inventory and sub inventory, then we'll test it so that it would be more clear for us to understand. So what setups we have to perform? First, we'll go and create inventory organization. Before you create inventory organization, if you want to create the separate location, you can create. We know very well how to create the location for inventory organization or business unit. For any location, how to create, we know. So if we are ignoring that point, we can use any one of the existing location. No issues. Create inventory organization and create sub inventory. Okay, create sub inventory. And what are the inventory organization we create, that we have to assign to item class, so that with that help of item class, the items will be able to create the same items we can assign to that inventory organization. Say assign inventory organization. Let's write as org instead of organization in short. Assign inventory org to item class. When you create new inventory organization, we have to associate that to item class. Then only we can assign the items which are created from the specific item class. Done. Now we can create item. Let's create new item and assign item to inventory organization. And we have to allow the current user to have access to this inventory organization. We know how to provision the access through data access. For current user has access to two inventory organizations only, right? One is US, other one is dollars. Those are the two child organizations we created as a part of the configuration testing. So we are going to create one more inventory organization. We have to allow that this user to have access to this new inventory organization to perform the transactions. Say provide data access for user. We are providing the data access for the user is nothing but giving the access to the user for our new inventory organization. Done. So we've done all these setups. Okay. Now we'll go and create the inventory organization. Create from the project or directly from the search page. Inventory organization, search for inventory organization. Inventory organization. Within this, you can find the task called as manage inventory organizations. Click on create. Arbitrary. We'll go with another inventory organization, say Irving. Okay. So city wise we are creating. We created first one we created with directly the country name. The other one we created as Dallas. Now we are going to create city called as Irving, which is in Texas. So name arbitrary. So we'll go with the same naming. So no space allowed. Select business unit. This inventory will be under which business unit? Here, arbitrary US. So by default system is taking the same location here. No issues, we can accept. Say this also belongs to same location, or else you can create the separate location for this inventory with the same city name, and that location you may select here. You can accept the same or you can change it, no issues. Since we are testing, you can go with that, no issues. Reality, you have to select exact location, right? So select that belongs to which legal entity, the association of this primary ledger. Now click on next to provide the parameters. Select the schedule which we created and specify the item master inventory for this child organization, that is ERP3 item master organization. And here you could see locator controls. One second. Yep, selected. So under general tab you could see locator control. Okay, so which locator control you want to use, that you can specify here. No locator control means as of now, what I mean so far, like what are the inventory organizations we created, how many we created? Two. For two inventory organizations we didn't select any locator control, that means we didn't implement. Now we want to implement, we want to use this locator control functionality for our sub inventories concept. So how you want to implement, what option you want to choose? The first one is no locator control. By default system is selected no locator control. That is the reason without locator concept we are able to perform the transactions, we are able to receive or you are able to issue the material from the sub inventory which are part of the specific inventory. So if you want to implement, you have to choose the option. So here you can say previously defined locator control. Previously defined locator control means predefined locator control. Predefined. Ignore the term called as locator control, just look at the term previously defined. It's nothing but predefined locator control. That means in which scenario we use previously defined or predefined. Okay, it's nothing but predefined locator control. So we have a row 1, and within the row 1, rack 1, rack 2, rack 3. That's how we created. So for specific, you want to decide, in specific sub inventory whatever you are going to receive, the combination you want to define. In row 1 you can have rack 1 and rack 2 only. You want to decide on that, you want to predefine. That means what you will do is, first of all you create the combinations. You create the combination called as row 1 rack 1. This is one combination. And row 1 rack 2. You will create this combination. First we will create like this. We will decide the combinations, then system will allow only these combinations at the time of you record the transaction. If you are going to receive some item into so and so sub inventory, this I am going to decide, this I am creating for sub inventory 1, and for sub inventory 2 I want to use this. I'll go to sub inventory 1 and I'll create this combination, row 1 rack 1, row 1 rack 2. For sub inventory 2, row 1 rack 1, row 1 and rack 3. This is how I'll create, so that when I'm going to receive the material into this sub inventory, I can choose this locator control only. So that means I'll predefine the same I want to. If I want to predefine, if I want to use the same at the time of transaction, you can go with this locator control. Previously defined means predefined. You'll predefine, you'll define, and the same whatever you define, that only you can use when you receive the material into organization. So I'll create like this. If I'm receiving some quantity of material into sub inventory 1, if I try to select that material 10 quantity you are receiving, that if you want to receive into row 1 rack 3, not possible. It has to be predefined. That combination need to be predefined, then only you can receive the 10 quantity of material into row 1 and rack 3. But you didn't define that combination for sub inventory 1. You define combinations by expecting to receive the material into rack 1 and rack 2, which are part of row 1. So if you try to receive the material into rack 3, not possible, because you selected, you decide within your organization. So only you will receive the material into predefined combinations. If you select this, you have to define, you have to create that combinations as a predefined before you go and record the transaction. The existing combinations only you can select at the time of receiving the material. This is the meaning of predefined. So if you select predefined, first you will define the combinations like this for each inventory, each sub inventory. So when you are receiving the material into respective sub inventory, you will be able to receive if combination is exist. If this is a real case, if you want to receive the material into sub inventory into rack 3, you cannot receive, because here you already created a combination. The material can be taken into rack 1 or 2 only, not into 3. Here if you talk about this, if you want to take the material into sub inventory 2 into row 1 and rack 2, not possible. Here already you predefined the combination. You want to take the material into which row and which rack. You specified in the row 1, you can take the material into rack 1 or rack 3, but not to rack 2. So if you go with the predefined, this is how you can predefine. Then if you try with some other combination, it doesn't work. That is the meaning of predefined. Okay, previously defined means predefined. And dynamic entry locator control. Dynamic entry means you don't need to predefine anything. When you are receiving into sub inventory 1, you can select any row, any rack. That means directly system will allow you. No need to set any rule. No rules. You are not going to predefine anything. You are receiving some material into sub inventory 1. You want to take into rack 1 and row 1 and rack 4. No issues. It won't go and verify any rule. So dynamic entry you choose, that means you are deciding the material can be taken into any row and any rack in any sub inventory. That is the meaning of dynamic entry. You can take the decision when you are receiving, you want to place in which row and which rack. Okay, you no need to decide. If you want to decide before you receive into sub inventories, better you can go with predefined, so that you can create the combinations. Within the combinations only system will allow. Otherwise you have a choice of placing the material in which any row and any rack. You can go with a dynamic entry. So if I set previously defined means predefined or dynamic entry at this inventory organization level, Irving, within that, if you are going to have 10 sub inventories, 10 sub inventories should follow the same rule. If I select dynamic entry, the same dynamic entry would be applicable for 10 sub inventories which are going to be within this inventory organization. If I select the rule called as previously defined, okay, the rule previously defined means will predefine for if you have a 10 sub inventories within this inventory organization. So for 10 sub inventories, you have to create that combinations before you go and record the transactions. So whatever predefined within that only you can receive. That means here inventory organization level, whatever you specify locator control as a previously defined or dynamic entry, that is applicable for all inventory organization. So I am selecting predefined, previously defined, I have a 10 sub inventories. For 10 sub inventories, I have to predefine the combination. So for existing combination only, the rules whatever I create, I can select. But say I have a 10 sub inventories, my requirement is different. For 5 inventories, I require predefined. 5 sub inventories I require predefined. And for 5 inventories, 5 more remaining inventories, I require dynamic entry. How it is possible? If you set the rule at inventory organization level, not possible. If you have a requirement within this inventory organization, you have a 10 sub inventories. For each sub inventory has a different requirement. Few sub inventories follows predefined rule, few sub inventories follows dynamic entry. So if that is your requirement, don't set predefined or dynamic entry here. You give it that option to sub inventories only. See here, locator control determined at sub inventory level. That means you are not deciding how you want to control with a previously defined or dynamic entry row and rack selection, that you can leave to sub inventories. If you select this option, locator control determined at sub inventory level, you can choose for that specific sub inventory whether you required previously defined or dynamic entry locator control you want to implement. If you select it, so within this inventory organization, whatever the sub inventories you create, the sub inventory level you can decide whether dynamic entry required for so and so sub inventory or predefined is required for so and so sub inventory, that you can decide. If you set here dynamic entry at inventory organization level, within this inventory organization how many sub inventories we are going to have, for all the same rule is applicable. You want to control at organization level or you want to give the option to manage that at sub inventory level, you can take the decision. If you want to control at inventory organization level, whether you want to go with the previously defined means predefined controls or dynamic entry option, you can take the decision. Any questions to understand this locator controls, please here. No control means nothing, just we have a three different controls. Okay, one, we can give the option to sub inventory, they can decide what option, what control they want to go. Otherwise you have a two options to control with the previously defined or dynamic entry for this inventory related sub inventories. Fine, let's proceed with, okay, we'll see first dynamic entry, later we'll test previously defined also. Let's go with the dynamic entry locator control for this inventory organization, so that for all the sub inventories which you are going to create within this inventory, same rule will be applicable. You cannot change it, also the same you have to follow, or else you can set let this control decided by sub inventories. If that is your plan, you can choose this value. Okay, anything is fine. So let's go with the dynamic entry locator control. Say save and close. So by selecting locator control, we created inventory organization. Done. Now we'll create sub inventory. To create the sub inventory, navigate to project. We have to select the scope selection. Manage implementation project. Select project. Search for the task called as sub inventory. Okay, manage sub inventories under locators. Click on go to task icon. So we want to create the sub inventory in which inventory organization? Select our inventory organization. We want to create the sub inventory for Irving inventory organization. Within this inventory organization, we want to create the sub inventory. We don't have any sub inventories within this inventory. Create. Click on create. So within this inventory organization level, which control we given, we remember that, right? Fine. So within this Irving's inventory organization, we are creating one sub inventory. So I'm giving name also with the same Irving one. That is sub inventory name. So see here, system is defaulting the locator control as a dynamic entry. That's all. Because we give an organization level as dynamic entry locator control. The same is system is applying for sub inventories which you are creating within that. That's all. Okay, dynamic entry. You cannot change it. So save and close. Done. Now the same inventory organization we have to assign to item class, so that with the help of item class, when you create the item, that item can be assigned to the same inventory organization, which inventory organization we are assigned to item class. Go to item class definition. So manage item classes. Click on go to task icon and find out our item class, which item class we created and which item class we are using to create the items. Find that item class. Our item class is ERP3 computers, right? You can click on the name or click on edit. By selecting that record, you can click on edit. So this is the one, right? Now go to security and assign our inventory organization with a combination of our user. Click on add row. So if you want to give the permissions for specific user for this inventory, you can just go with this person. Otherwise, group means role. Here you may specify name as a role name, warehouse manager. Which user has access to warehouse manager, they can have access to this inventory organization for this item class. That specification you can do. You can set up this security at user level or role level. Let's proceed with the just user. Find out our user. ERP3 and select the Irving inventory organization. Okay, done. And it's very important, you have to give the permissions. Select this record, click on add privileges, search, select all, say apply, say okay, say save and close. Done. Now we created. Now I'll create the separate item for this to test this locator control. Because for other items what we have without the locator control and all, we have a transaction, but you can use also, but let's go with the separate item. It's a simple task to create. To create the item, go to product information management, go to task list, so create item. Select our item master and select template. Say pot and set status and life cycle phase even not applicable since mandatory set it. Specify unit of measurement, then go to specifications. Anyway, system will default, and item people, it will just default from the class itself. So even if you place the cursor, you could see all the permissions system already taken. Only the point here is we have to assign this item to our inventory organization. So to this inventory organization, or say save and close. Say apply. Fine. So we're done. Now current user.
Uh,
Yep.
where where we have assigned this on the EBS, similar to EBS, the tools we assign the stock locator. No, here there is no option.
Sorry.
Item sub inventory. There is an option there. There we used to assign the relevant sub inventory on the stock locator in EBS. Now here where I can assign it.
What do you want to assign?
Against the item, I would like to just emphasize where is this item is going to be located, because it is a predefined.
Yeah. That option also we have. That we call as controlling the this. I mean, locator control you can set at item level also. That is the point you are talking about. That is there is an option if you want to specify, but not mandatory. If you want to set the controls at item level, then only required, not mandatory otherwise.
But where I can, if I
I'm
make
going to
the
show you.
control.
I'm going to show you. 1 second, please. So if you want to set locator control at item level, that you have to decide at sub inventory level, so that if this item is associated to that sub inventory, the system will have go with the item level locator control. Go to inventory, scroll down here. Here you can specify. Okay. Here are the controls. If you want to set this level.
Then I should go to the relevant subinventory and assign this item there.
You want to, no, assignment is not required. Assignment is not required. You say sub inventory level, you can specify you want to maintain the control at item level. Next time when you go to sub inventory, I'll show you that option. Okay. Again, inventory organization level, if you set locator control determined at sub inventory level, if you set that option, then you will be able to choose at item level. You have to give that option to sub inventory level. Then you can set sub inventory level, you can specify dynamic entry or predefined or item level control. Locator control at what level you want to decide, organization level or sub inventory level or item level. When we create sub inventory, I'll show you that option. Now we are not on that page. Okay, I'll show you. We'll be creating again one more sub inventory. At that time I'll show you. Fine. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So now we have to give the access. This user doesn't have access to this Irving inventory organization to perform the transactions. Now we'll go and provide the data access for this user to have access to that new inventory organization. Search for the task called as data access for users. Go with this task. You don't need to go with this separate task, inventory organization data access for use. It's not required. This task, with this task you can do any assignment. Click on add. So I'm selecting warehouse manager. We have a three roles, right? So warehouse manager, warehouse operator, inventory manager. So you can just assign this inventory to one role. That would be enough. We'll be able to access inventory organization. ERP3 Irving. After assigning this, ideally we have to run LDAP job. I just will go and submit LDAP job. If you don't submit also, system will synchronize, but sometimes it may take time to perform that. Better you can submit. Submit. It may take some time, but we no need to wait to see the status has succeeded. We can proceed. When we done, we completed all these setups. Done. Now what we'll do is we'll create the transaction. Since we implemented only in inventory, we can go and perform the miscellaneous transaction only. We'll go and create miscellaneous receipt. So when you're receiving the material earlier, before implementing locator control within specific inventory organization, when you're receiving the material, we select only sub inventory. We want to receive it to just sub inventory. Now we have a locator control implemented. So system will ask us into so and so sub inventory, you want to receive that material into which row and which rack also. We'll see that. Okay, create miscellaneous receipt. Hope the synchronization is completed. If that is completed, we can perform, or else we can wait for some time. Okay, by assuming this new role synchronization is completed, we are navigating. Yes, that is synchronized. Your system is taking it. So create miscellaneous transaction. If you want to change, you can change. Here you can switch from one inventory organization to another inventory organization. Not required. We want to create for this new inventory organization. Reason for this inventory organization only, we have locator control implemented. Go to create miscellaneous transaction. Select transaction type as a miscellaneous receipt. Select item. So only this item we have within this inventory organization. And within the same inventory organization, you may not apply locator controls for all. Irving. And one more point here. Let's go to sub inventory. We didn't choose our locator structure for our sub inventory. Go to sub inventory. Click on edit. So locator structure by default as a part of vision instance, which structure is available, nothing but structure instance that system is choosing. Here we have to choose our locator structure which we created. This is the one, right? Okay. So save and close. Now create miscellaneous transaction. So that as per our structure, we can specify row and rack. Inventory management. Go to task list. Create miscellaneous transaction. Miscellaneous receipt. Select our sub inventory. Within this inventory organization, only one sub inventory we have. For that sub inventory, we specified locator structure also. As per that structure, it will display those two segments to select. And we given dynamic entry. You can choose any row, any rack. Since dynamic entry, if you go with a previously defined, nothing but predefined, if that is the case, say we are using previously defined. If I select row is 1, rack is 1, if I say okay, it won't accept. Those need to be defined at sub inventory level. Okay, then only it will accept. Since now we are using dynamic entry, any row you can take this item into any row, within that row into any rack. If I say okay, it will accept. Since that is a dynamic entry, any row, any rack you can take, it should accept because dynamic entry. If you are following previously defined, now whatever we selected row and rack, it won't accept. That also will be testing. First we'll go with this. How much quantity you are receiving into this sub inventory into row 1 and rack 1. 25 quantity. So this is some additional representation before locator. We are selecting into so and so sub inventory. Now within the same sub inventory, the 25 quantity you are taking into which row and which rack which are part of locator concept. So select account code combination. You can choose any one of the existing code combination. Click on search, select. Anyway, these are all for testing. You can proceed with any account. Done. Now say submit. Now you want to issue the material. If you want to issue the material also, since for the specific item, which item from which sub-inventory you want to issue, for the sub-inventory if locator control is applicable, it will ask us to issue from which row and which rack. Say material miscellaneous issue. So if you are going to issue from this sub-inventory, locator control is applicable. You have to specify, it will be mandatory as per process. You want to issue the material from which row? From the row 1, and row 1 from which rack? From rack 1. You should specify. You may not see field as a mandatory, but system will act it as a mandatory when you try to perform the transaction. You want to issue only 5 quantity. That's all. This is how when you are receiving and when you are issuing, account we didn't provide. So when you are receiving and when you are issuing, you have to address with the locator related information. Select any one of the existing code combination. Even if you go to on hand quantity, you can see the same. Within this 20 quantity we have, because we received total 25, we issued 5. So within this inventory organization, we have sub inventory called as Irving 1. Within that, in row 1 rack 1 we have 20 quantity. If you have a quantity within the row 1 rack 2, that also it will show as a separate line. So even you will be able to track the quantity that row and rack wise, or other segments whatever you implement as per your client requirement. Okay, so now we tested dynamic entry. In tomorrow session we'll see the other options, like previously defined and determined at sub inventory level. We'll set that option and we'll test those scenarios also, and we can understand about this. So any questions on today's session, please?